start. Welcome everybody to the Scottish Police Authority Resources Committee. I'm Pauline Howie. I'm just taking on chair of the Resources Committee. Should I drop off the call, however, Alistair Hay will take over chairing the meeting until I'm able to be reconnected. I want to say a warm welcome to other colleagues from the Police Authority, from Police Scotland, from the Scottish Government and from HMICS. You're all most welcome. Great also to be joined by both Deputy Chief Constable Beck Smith and Deputy Chief Constable Alan Spears, who will provide valuable strategic and operational input to the conversation, I'm sure, today. And we will be joined by other colleagues from Police Scotland as we progress through the agenda. Warm welcome also to Breda McCafferty, Police Scotland's new Director of Transformation. This is your first meeting of the Resources Committee. You're most welcome. We've got apologies from James Gray, Chief Financial Officer, who's on leave, but we are welcome to Lynn Brown, who's Acting Head of Finance and has a few items on the agenda today. I'd like to remind colleagues that we have all read the papers, so any introductory remarks to the papers should be kept brief and to a minimum so that we can focus on discussion and clarification of any points and, of course, importantly, approval of those areas that are required from the Resources Committee today. So we'll move on to 1.2 apologies. We've got apologies from member Tom Halpin this morning, but we are quoted. 1.3 declarations of interest and connections. Is there anything anybody would like to raise at this stage? No? Okay, thank you. I'd like to invite members to agree in accordance with section 20 of the SPA standing orders to take items 5 through to 9 in private, and also to note that items 6 and 9.1.1 have been withdrawn from today's agenda. Are members agreeable?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. 1.5, decisions taken since the last meeting of the committee. There have been no formal committee business conducted since we last met. We did, however, have a really informative and helpful development day last week, which was intended to take forward the findings from our committee effectiveness self-assessment that we conducted earlier this year. The session was really informative. We had a number of very useful discussions, particularly around transformation and benefits reporting and change management, long-term financial plan and reporting to committee. And we'll take on board those findings as we progress throughout this year. So many thanks to everybody that was involved in those presentations and discussions. Moving on then to section 2, minutes of the previous meeting, which was on the 13th of March. I would invite members to approve those minutes as an accurate record.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. And the action log, we have a number of actions that are proposed to close, except for action 2, benefits realisation committee reporting, which is due in August. Are people content to close those remaining actions?
Yep.
Yep, okay. Thanks very much. That takes us on then to section 3, and 3.1 is the provisional year-end outturn 24-25. Lynn, over to yourself, please.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everyone. Yeah, so the outturn report is included in Appendix A to the report, so just setting out all the detail across revenue reform and capital. So again, I'll take the report as read, but just to call out the sort of key highlights. Obviously, members are aware, it was an extremely challenging year. We were running below budgeting assumptions at the start of the year, which created an early sort of emerging underspend on the financial position. That was all taken into account with the revenue investment that was approved throughout the year, but also the pay discussions also to help support our pay offer in 24-25. So overall, pleased to say, broadly, overall break-even position in line with our funding. What the table on page 2, of the appendix, that shows that as our core revenue budget, we are £2.3 million overspent on core revenue, but that is offset by a £2.5 million underspend in reform. So revenue and reform from a Scottish Government perspective, from an annual reports perspective, is one revenue budget. We report it separately internally, but it is one revenue. So overall, our revenue position has a slight underspend, but as I say, broadly in line with Q3 forecast. Similarly, capital, we are reporting a break-even position. Again, that's been a topic of conversation throughout the year. As part of Resources Committee, again, we had that slow spend at the start of the year and that accelerated spend towards the end of the financial year. So again, huge effort across the organisation, but we are reporting a break-even position in line with our funding for capital as well. So again, the detail is set out in the report, but that was all I was looking really to call out as part of the update. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lynn, and well done to everybody involved in terms of coming out with such a close position to break even, given such an enormous budget, complex and challenging year, as you said, and those thanks to the whole wider SLT as well as the finance team. Thank you. Alistair.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And first of all, can I just echo your words? It was an incredibly challenging year, and credit is due to the finance team, but beyond that, actually the budget holders and all the teams that work for them in bringing this all together. My first question really is in terms of the revenue budget and fluctuations in the number of police wanted police officers throughout the year, particularly in the early part of the year, which has helped. So I'm just wondering if somebody could expand upon how Police Scotland coped with that fluctuation in officer numbers throughout the year. Was there an impact on service delivery and ensuring the safety and well-being of communities and people across Scotland? What were the mitigations that were put in place around that area? So that would be my first question. Thank you.
Thanks, Alistair. DCC Smith, do you want to come in on that?
I think maybe myself, Chair. Obviously, I've got responsibility for people, which includes recruitment. So it's a really good question, Alistair. So thanks for that. I think the first challenge that we have is that when you have any pause or slowing down of recruitment, at some point in the future, it has to accelerate again. So that increased demand puts a pressure on recruitment, and it puts a pressure on training. And I guess an observation for myself also is that when we bring an intake of probationers, as we did, on the back of that, we've got 250 or 260 on a course. It's a really big number of recruits. And I think the experience for a recruit is definitely stronger when the courses are a little bit smaller, and we can devote more time and focus on to those that we're training. So that's one element. So hence the reason in this year, you'll see from our recruitment profile that we've got 6 or 7 intakes over the course of the year, and we're in a stronger place where the number of recruits that we're bringing in is predicated on the number of people who are leaving the organisation. So the last couple of intakes have been closer to 100, which is a much more manageable number. I think some of the other challenges is we had to be really mindful about promotion and transfer, and probably in both of those fronts slowed that down, because what wasn't changing was that we were still seeing a number of officers resigning and retiring from the service. 70% or so retire, So those are gaps that we then have to carry. So it did put a pressure on us, and I think the other part is it takes time to recover from that. Even a short pause on recruitment, it takes us 6 months to start to really plug the gap. So I think what we were able to try and do is ensure that the resources that were providing the service within local communities was maintained, but some of the other functions like SCD and maybe some of our specialist departments maybe suffered a little bit because we weren't transferring officers away from frontline. So there was a bit of shift in demand. So I think on reflection, in the ideal world, it's not the place that we'd want to be in.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Alan, that emphasis on what you've learned from it, but protecting the front line and recognising that reprofiling it in future years, will help protect both the specialist and the frontline services. So that's good to hear. Chair, can I ask a second question on the capital budget?
Please do.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of capital, when you go through it, it looks like the way that it was balanced in the end was accelerating the spend that you had in terms of vehicles. I know we'll touch on that a little bit more. And looking at this year, I know I'm jumping ahead slightly, but looking at this year, we're on track in the early part of the year with capital spend. But the comment is that this is because we're catching up on capital expenditure that we'd intended to spend last financial year. Now, I know that you have in place a multi-year capital plan. So I'm just wondering what the thoughts are in terms of bringing that back into line, across those multi-years, so we don't end up in the same position at the end of this financial year where, we are doing relatively easy capital purchases. I know none of them are easy, but you get my drift on that. So how are we trying to align the capital expenditure back into that multi-year plan so that the significant investments in complicated areas like the estate are suitably addressed?
Linda, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, I can come in the first instance. So yeah, certainly happy to pick this up through the other agenda items as well as we discuss P1 and the capital planning. But just kind of overall, yes. So Capital Investment Group closely monitored the in-year spend, and that was obviously feeding through into the sort of quarterly and monthly reports that were coming through governance. And that is essentially where decisions were taken around reallocating spend, where we started to see slippage. Obviously, estates was one of the ones we started to see slippage quite early on because of supplier issues, delays in some approvals, etc. So from Q1 onwards, we were already looking about how we mitigated any potential slippage across the portfolios. So what we will see when we look at P1, so fleet was, as you mentioned, was one of the ones that was brought forward as a year-end lever. But as part of the P1 report next, you can see we've got a £5 million adjustment to their revenue budget for next year to reflect that. So that was just to kind of solidify that it's not that Fleet were out buying £5 million extra to balance the budget. It is genuine reallocation because we've reduced their budget for next year. So that will feature as we come into the P1 report. And then similarly, we've done the same with Airwave because that's got a 3-year spend. So, we reprofiled some of those purchases, and just overall, which again happy to go into more detail, there is a lot of work kind of ongoing through Capital Investment Group and the capital planning task force that was set up for the development of the 25-26 budget. And that was us really taking the capital requirements but really trying to bring them into an actual delivery plan, as opposed to we know we need the capital, but how are we effectively going to deliver and what resources do we need, etc. So all that work was done for developing the 25-26 budget and was reported through the kind of final budget approval in March. But what we are doing is continuing those capital investment task force groups to really go into the detail of the business plans, again, to to feed through to capital investment group. So that will be the business areas looking at what challenges are they facing, what blockers are they, what timelines, what mitigating actions are we taking. So we're really delving into that level of detail through the capital planning task force, which is a new thing for this financial year in terms of the monitoring. And we are also looking to develop that longer term plan as well, which happy to pick that up in the paper later on. Thanks.
Thanks, Lynn. Thanks, Chair. That's my questions for the moment.
Okay, thanks. I think DCC's wanted to come in on that, and then Angela, bring yourself in.
Thanks, Chair. It's a really good question, Alistair. And with the sort of new portfolio head on, one thing that I really want to be able to do, so I'll be chairing the capital planning task force, and the point of that, as Lynn rightly makes, is to make sure business areas understand their spend and get a progress update in terms of where we're up to. Just also alongside that, I'm really conscious of the fact that I want to be able to spend really wisely in the capital space. There's lots of areas that I think are really important in terms of investment. You mentioned estates, but also widely in some of the sort of digital and data elements of our spend moving forward. So what I've asked the teams to do, working with Lynn and the team, is coming up with a sort of medium and long-term plan around what are the key investments that we've got over the next 12, 24, 36 months. Where do we want to put our money? Where will we get the most bang for our buck, in, for want of a better phrase, in terms of reducing the demand on the front line, things like investment in public digital contact, so we can reduce the demand that's coming in to policing that goes out to the front line, and make really sensible decisions that will make a difference for our workforce is kind of where I'm at with that. And the capital planning task force will allow us to have those conversations, discussions, and probably for the first time have a really clear holistic view with my portfolio of the organisation in totality to make really sensible spending decisions across the organisation. So I'm confident that this year we'll be able to do that in a way that perhaps we haven't managed to do over the last couple of years. So hopefully that gives you some confidence in that.
I'm really interested to hear that, and actually some of the stuff you've touched on, I was going to pick up some of those issues with Breda's paper later on, because there's a clear relationship there. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Alistair. Angela.
Thank you, Pauline, and thanks, Lynn. And again, just to endorse what everybody said, well done to everybody. It's no mean feat when you've got a budget of that magnitude, so that's a terrific outcome, so congratulations to everybody. I just had a couple of questions, one some on revenue and then one on the capital, like Alistair. The revenue investment bids that are referenced in the paper totalling 13.1 million, and there's mention of the modernisation of the workforce. I'm just wondering if that's something that is captured in Breda's plan now in terms of the benefits that we're going to see on that, and I can maybe just explore that a wee bit more in Breda's paper, but I just wondered what information went forward to demonstrate the benefits that we were looking for or you were expecting from that type of investment. I'm not sure what the projects were. And my other on the revenue was the more efficient VR/VER process that is referenced, and I just wondered how is that sitting then with officer numbers and managing the workforce numbers? What brought that about? Thank you.
Lynn, please.
So I can come in first, and then Breda may want to ask. So I'll start with your second point first, Angela, and then we can move on to the workforce modernisation. So just in terms of the VR/VER process, as part of the 24-25 budget, there was a commitment to find staff savings that were proportionate to the officer reductions when we moved from 17,234 to 16,600. So that was a VR. It was assumed that all those savings would be achieved through VR. We had the funding in the budget for that. So we run the process in the first quarter of 24-25, but actually we delivered a lot of our savings through holding vacancies as opposed to exiting staff. So we actually ended up you know, so if we assumed there was going to be 200 staff exits, half were delivered through deleting vacancies as opposed to staff exits. So we didn't spend all of the VR money that was allocated within the budget. But what that did help to do was support the pay award offer in 24-25. So that was reallocated to help fund that on that sort of one-off basis in 24-25. Yep, so just moving on to the workforce modernisation. So again, yes, the Revenue Investment Group was stood up last year. That covered a whole raft of things, including workforce modernisation, overtime to support the reduced officer numbers, etc. So as part of the budget bid into government for 25-26 and as part of the 25-26 budget, you know, we highlighted the range of the posts that were approved on an annual basis, you know, from permanent to permanent staff being the minimum requirement we would need to find savings for, up to 13.5 million, I think it was, in terms of permanent and temporary staff. So that has been subject to conversations internally about how we would look to develop the efficiencies and realise the efficiencies to support that going forward. So we're working very closely with the DEP, PIDA, the organisation, etc. to look at that. So the modernisation was things around like firearms licensing, C3, etc., all kind of reported through the budget. So I don't know if Breda wants to come in specifically to talk about the benefits, but we are working closely together to ensure that that transformation plan, benefits realisation and the financial plan are all aligned as we move into developing our 26-27 budget bid for government. Sorry, I know I'm throwing lots of financial years there, but I guess the key thing I'm trying to say is it's all linked and we're working closely together to bring that all into line, but certainly happy if Breda would like to add to that. Thanks.
Thanks, Lynn. Breda?
Thank you. So I'm just going to build on what Lynn said, and the last bit, particularly that we're all working together on this. So as we talk often at the moment in terms of workforce modernisation, it's almost a topic that DCC Smith and I are talking about literally daily at the moment. And I know that DCC Smith was speaking with Alan and Jane, the other DEPs, yesterday on this exact topic. So in terms of your question, Angela, around is it covered in our plan, certain elements of it are covered in the plan. And the key is there's an awful lot of different strands to it. So what we are really keen to do is to demonstrate how all of them link together under the banner, if you like, of workforce modernisation, to make sure that we're not duplicating, but to make sure that we are understanding what's that really going to give us in terms of benefits, when are they going to be realised, and we need to, and we are working on how can we effectively track that. I know I mentioned last week on our development day that we have spoken with DCC Connors, and when we are working on elements that will make a difference to strengthen the front line, the way that we are going to track that is on the Ops Policing Management Board. So it will be DCC Connors and her team that will be thinking about, once they understand, you know, this piece of work is going to release this number of people, they will be the ones that are making the decision around this is where we need to prioritise those people. So we will have a proper process to, under the umbrella of workforce modernisation, to be understanding all of the different elements, understanding what and when that is going to realise benefits, and properly tracking that for you. So we're in the first stages really of pulling that together, and you know, in terms of conversations with Lynn's, Bex, etc., we're getting pretty much aligned on it. So hopefully that's helpful as a starter for that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's hugely encouraging just to hear how the different elements are all being joined up together and under the banner of that transformation. So yes, thank you. Pauline, I see Beck's got her hand up. I'm not sure if you want to bring her in before I've got one question on capital.
Yeah, please come in, DCC Smith.
Thank you. It was just to follow up on that. I think this is a really complex issue, Angela, and you're absolutely right to raise it. The bottom line is, and I'll try and put it in the most simplest of terms, we need to be able to understand what the workforce looks like to deliver Vision 2030. And in my mind, the way the current workforce is set up, mainly due to budget constraints around officer numbers, where we would perhaps want to have civilian staff members doing certain roles, we're often constrained because of the way our budget is set in terms of 17,234, 16,6, etc. We're having conversations at the moment to understand the flex in that. And from my point of view, I think there are many jobs in the organisation that would be better served with individuals who've got the right skills and capabilities to bring them in from outside to do that, as opposed to training an officer, is where I'm at. So in the broadest term, we want to get to a position where we understand where are the warranted officer posts that we need to have, is the first point. And then where are the posts where we might consider thinking, actually, what skills and capabilities gaps have we got? And how do we bring those individuals into the organisation? And I would like to get us into a position where we can look at secondments from universities, where we can bring people in on apprenticeship schemes, all of those things down the line. And that links to having a really good workforce plan around what are the people that we need in the organisation, where do we need them to be? And in terms of sort of proof of concept, we know bringing in civilian investigators in, investigation, vetting, etc., has been really successful. And it's allowed the officers to do what officers should do in terms of using their warranted powers, with support from civilian investigators who were then able to build up the skill set around certain investigations, etc., and utilise those within the organisation and deploy them into different areas. So in a roundabout way, we're not there yet, is probably the point that I'm making. There's a lot to do to get us from where we are now to where I can see we need to be in the future. And P&D have recruited a strategic workforce planning lead and somebody who's got organisational design experience to help us on that journey. But I think the most important point to make is probably, for the first time, having the transformation portfolio has allowed us to have that view right across the workforce, and then enable us to make some really key strategic decisions around where are the areas that we think we need to modernise, where are those individuals, how do we move people from A to B to make the workforce the most effective it's been. And I think also things like, how do we provide career paths for police staff, for example? How do we take some of the police staff that we've currently got and consider retraining and deploying in different areas of interest, etc. So something that we've not done in the past, I think is really important for us to look at. So it's definitely a real work in progress, but I'm really confident that we've got the right people around the table, the right discussions that are ongoing, and everyone's sort of aligned as to how we want to get there. And I'm hoping we'll be able to present something to you, a first sort of iteration of what that might look like at the end of the calendar year, in its most basic sense. And then as we work through the transformation portfolio and business plan year 2 and 3, we'll be able to add to that. But one of the key points, and you made it really well, Angela, is tracking that. And I think for the first time, we've built that into the high level plan so we can show those individuals that are released, or where we've automated something, for example, the capacity that's been released, and then make the decisions as to where we want those individuals to be able to go. We've not been able to do that in the past. So hopefully that gives you some sort of reassurance. This is, I would say, kind of for me at the moment, is #1 priority in terms of the work that I'm focusing on, and Breda and the team are building that into the plan. So hopefully that gives you a bit of reassurance around the importance of this particular task.
Yeah, it does. Thank you, DCC Smith and Lynn and Breda. That's really encouraging, especially given the proportion of the budget that goes on staff, officers. That's hugely encouraging, and I very much welcome it, because I think that we all recognise that people see work very differently now. The context that we're working in is very different, crime's very different, and people want to work differently. So the more agile the service can be, then the better we'll be at attracting people. So yeah, I'll look forward to that. That's great. Just one other question, and I'm sure it'll come up at different points in the agenda today, but and I take your point, DCC Smith, about the capital planning task force, which I think is a great introduction, and in terms of giving that oversight and control. So that's a really exciting development. I just wonder, though, what assurance the committee can take on estates. I think we're all really aware of the time scale that it can take to move some of the decisions, some of the things that we know are earmarked for development. And the paper shows that, you know, there has been a delay, there's been a lag in the progress that the estates plan has made. So I'm just wondering what assurance we can take for the future that this will now be a priority, notwithstanding that there's other capital projects such as digital and data that have already been mentioned.
So I've got DCC Smith and then Lynn.
Probably provide a sort of high level overview around that and bring Lynn in maybe for a couple of details in terms of the finance side. So estates is, as you all know, massively complicated, and it links so intrinsically to the workforce and the model of policing style that we want to adopt. So being able to understand what our future estates footprint looks like is something that's really important. And I think the work that's been done to date shows us the current position of our estate and where we are releasing assets, etc., and making those decisions around co-location moving forward. The work that James and the team have been doing now, and they've just recruited somebody, fingers crossed, into post, which will have the experience of building a new estates footprint and what that looks like. So for the first time, we'll be able to be in a position to understand what our estates ask will be in the future around our operating model and what that looks like for our officers and staff, around where we need them to be, what skills and capabilities they will have. So therefore, what does the building need to be able to provide that? And we also know that that looks very different now to where it looked in terms of our estate footprint that we've currently got, which is in most, you know, a lot of places is not fit for purpose. Custody is a really good example of that. We know that we've got a lot of custody suites across the organisation that aren't fit for purpose at the moment. And actually, what a lot of forces have done in England and Wales is build bespoke, big custody centres which are fit for purpose and able to accommodate the demand, etc. So Wendy and the team are working through what does that look like in terms of our future estates footprint for custody, and then how do we do that? Is that something that we look at building? Is that something that we can utilise current estates for, etc.? So in answer to your question, and it's probably not going to give you the answer that you want at the moment, those conversations are ongoing, Angela, around what does that look like in the future? What does our 10-year estates master plan look like for the organisation? We've got some of those answers, but some of them will fall out of the work we're doing around reorganising the organisation in terms of workforce and target operating model. I don't know, Lynn, if there's anything that you wanted to add in terms of detail to that, but I suppose just be assured that it's something that's absolutely at the forefront of our mind. And you know, as a team, we're meeting every couple of weeks around the estates piece to understand what that looks like to make decisions at the moment in terms of best investment and best way forward for that. I guess some of that we're going to have to make some decisions that perhaps we don't have all the answers to at the moment, but we're going to have to make some decisions because our estate isn't fit for purpose in certain areas, and we know that we're going to have to just invest. And you know, things like Fetis that James and the team are working on, custody, West Bell Street in Dundee. There's so many key areas at the moment that are coming up that need real work and attention. So we will address those as we go. But my sense is the importance of having a really clear 10-year plan, because we're going to need substantial capital investment to be able to do that around where we want to be in the future. Is really important and key, and James is structuring the estates team to be able to help us make those decisions, because we don't have the skills and capabilities of somebody with a construction background, for example, currently in the team. So that's what James is bringing in to enable us to understand what that looks like in the processes that we need to go to. We're not there at the moment, but we will absolutely get there. It's all part of the plan, and Breeder and the team have built the estates master plan into the transformation plan so that we can see those key points and decision making that we need to make and have it all joined up, because as you said earlier, it all links, and it absolutely does. You can't have people in the place unless you've got the estate, unless you understand what the target operating model is, etc. So it's completely linked, and I'm confident that with the setup that we've got at the moment in transformation, we'll have those answers to be able to make those decisions.
Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you. That's good, and I would agree that sometimes you can't wait till you've got everything nailed down. You know, there's a bit of taking sensible decisions and moving pragmatically. So that's what I'm taking from that, Bex. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everybody. Lynn, thanks for presenting the draft outturn. Next steps, I guess, full audit and then presentation to ARAC.
Yes, for the accounts. The outturn report will go to board as well, though, I think. Yes, I'm not sure it goes to board at the end of the month, but yeah, then the final accounts will be subject to audit and publication later on towards the end of the calendar year.
Great, thanks very much. So moving on to 3.2 and a verbal update on current year revenue position.
Yep. So yes, just in terms of revenue, we typically don't bring a period one report on revenue. We have the last couple of years because we quite early on in the year we knew there were some emerging challenges from the financial position. So just a quick verbal update in terms of where we are in revenue for 25-26. So we've had the period two results now, so that's up until the end of May. We are not seeing anything at the minute that's concerning. We're a little bit behind on a year-to-date basis, about 1.8 million behind year-to-date. It's predominantly within non-pay spend. We know salaries are typically month-on-month spend. It's pretty fixed across the year, whereas that non-pay spend is quite variable depending on demand, etc. So the majority of that is at the moment down to timing differences. We will obviously be looking at it in full detail as we move into to the end of period three and we do our quarter one forecast, but certainly nothing from the results at the minute that's causing any concern. Obviously there's pay discussions ongoing which will have an impact on the financial position overall, but that's as much as I've really got to say about that at the minute. We're at various stages of that, but certainly from a spend to date point of view, nothing really specific to call out at this point.
Thanks very much, Lynn. And I guess the key financial threats and opportunities remain as presented at the time of the budget, yeah.
Absolutely, and as we bring back through the reports, they will be reported, each month. That's the area we typically, that where there's real sensitivities or assumptions around the budget that we will be closely monitoring along with anything else that may materialise, but we will report back in them as we would usually do through either bringing them into forecast if they're going to materialise or updating the threats and ops so that members are aware of those sort of sensitivities around the budget position.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so we will note the verbal update on revenue and move on to capital update. We've got a paper here for discussion and a section on approval of a capital budget adjustment.
Yeah, so capital reports, so again, as I mentioned, P1 reports, because of year end, we don't typically bring period one reports, but again, just want to keep capital at the forefront of everybody's mind, which I'm sure it is given the conversation, that we've just had there. We've probably covered off quite a bit of it just through the discussion we've already had, but essentially period one spend is in line with the year-to-date budget, which was 5.2 million. As has already been pointed out, a lot of that is slippage from last financial year, which we were aware of in terms of, we had to manage those year-end levers. We had to kind of slip some of the delivery dates, etc., just to balance out the annual funding settlements. So not surprising that we're seeing some of the slippage in 24-25, but really then just as per the previous conversation, the real focus now is how we deliver the 25-26 capital plans. So appreciate the report as presented at the minute. It's quite a brief report just to give that sort of interim update at period one. We will and we have developed the reporting for period two. Obviously last year we had the RAG status around the commitments and the contractual spend. We have adapted our reporting slightly because we are really looking to report on the delivery of the capital plans as well. So it will have a similar look and feel, but it'll be slightly different information. Period two report has been developed. Happy to share once that's been through committees, because I don't, through internal committees, I don't think period two hits resources committee. I think the next one will be the Q1 report, but I can double check that, but certainly happy to sort of share that once it's been through our internal boards, if that's helpful, just to see what that will look like. But essentially just everything that we've been speaking about is how we, can I get the momentum on delivering the capital plans as presented in the budget back in March, and also any mitigating actions that we can look at, what can be brought forward, etc., if we do start to see slippage. But that will be closely monitored through the Capital Planning Task Force and Capital Investment Group. Thanks.
Lynn, thanks very much. And I think we would take you up on your offer to share with us the period 2 report, given capital is such a key enabler of driving the transformation needed to deliver the 2030 vision and 4 strategic outcomes. So that would be most helpful. Thanks. Colleagues, sorry, Lynn? Did you want
Sorry,
to
I do this all the time. The only other aspect, as you mentioned, is the Appendix B, which is the budget environment that I was speaking about earlier about Fleet to reduce their budget. So that is presented for approval for members for approval, just to adjust that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Before we come to that, are there any comments or questions that members want to make on the rest of the report? We have had quite a discussion in capital as part of section 3.1. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised. So are members content to approve the capital budget revision as set out in Appendix B? Yes, okay, thanks. Thanks very much, Lynn. Thank you.
Thank you.
So moving on to item 4, transformation and oversight of benefits. Who's going to lead off on this?
So I'm happy to. So I know we had a really thank you, Chair. I know we had a thorough conversation last week, and I think it's always helpful just to sort of put all of this into context when we talk about sort of transformation, and particularly about the benefits. And for me, it's always a reminder that the reason that we're looking at this in this amount of detail now is because of the work that was obviously completed before I joined in terms of review and change. And for me, it's always, and everything that we're focused on is around, I suppose, resolving the sort of 3/4 big areas that came out of that. So for me, the key is that we have a very ambitious, a very exciting change agenda. In the past, we haven't always been good enough at aligning that to the vision and being clear in terms of what exactly is the benefit that we're going to get from doing that. So that for me is the first point. Probably the second thing is that we have a lot of governance, we have a lot of reporting and templates, and the feedback was it's pretty extensive and it's not always proportional or sort of fit for purpose. So we're looking at that. The third bit is, for me, particularly is around within the team, we don't have the change management capability to deliver this portfolio. So that's something that we need to look at. And the fourth part linked with the benefits is we have not been very good at tracking them. We have not been robust enough at the beginning in terms of identifying what are the specific tangible and non-tangible benefits. We haven't been good enough at the beginning in terms of identifying how are we going to track them. And how we're going to make sure they've actually been delivered. So for me, they are the fundamental aspects that inform all of the work that I'm looking at within transformation. So if I think about element 4.1, and I know you've seen the report on benefits for the end of last year, and as I look at myself, the numbers, they're not particularly good reading. One positive thing, which I mentioned last week, is that the actual numbers are verified by Finance in August. So as I look at the numbers myself, they're not quite as sort of unappetizing as they look. So just in terms of, I did some calculations yesterday, which I thought would be quite helpful to share with you. And obviously these do need to be verified by Finance, but Lynn and I have spoken about them. Is if you look at the cashable benefits, at the moment on the document that I submitted, it said delivered to date was 6 odd million. It's actually 7.75 million, which is 59% of the forecast. And obviously that doesn't take into account what we will deliver this year. In terms of the non-cashable officer efficiencies, on the document that was submitted, it was 78,000 hours. The actual reality is 261,000, so we're at 51%. So it's significantly more than this, than the information. And the non-cashable staff, we've sort of submitted 18,000. It's actually up to 105,000, so it's 41%. So it's still not where it needs to be. That's my kind of key message. You know, when you look at the percentages, they are still not where they need to be. I think it's just worth recording that they are a lot better than it looked in the paper, and it's literally a timing because we're waiting for those to be formally approved by finance. So if I think about what that means, so benefits we need to look at, I thought it would be helpful to reiterate the two kind of, I suppose, key things, and we've sort of spoke about it a little bit so far this morning. The big piece of work is pulling this all together. So we have an awful lot of exciting projects that are going on, a lot of really important projects that will make a phenomenal difference. And we need to make sure that within transformation, Bex and I have complete oversight of it, not so that we can control everything, but so that we can make sure that when things have an impact on people, we're aligned so that people aren't falling over. We also have a limit in terms of our internal resource to deliver this. We're kind of at capacity at the moment, and each time we get a new idea, we need to make sure that it is properly reviewed, it's properly prioritised, so that we can make some informed decisions about what is most important and most critical for us to be working on. So pulling all of this together in a big plan is the critical first step. I was talking to John earlier. We bumped into each other, and I was sharing with him the plan. And I was saying to John that the problem is at the moment it's in a big document. It's not really it's fit for purpose for us, because on this document we have clarity on all of the different transformations, all of the different projects within them. We have clarity on what's it going to take to deliver that in terms of the effort, the money, the resources, the time, and also the impact and the benefits. We're tracking all of that, and we're using that to give us an idea of prioritisation. We're then using real intelligence overlaid onto that to say, well, look, this is what it's telling us. What do we know is reality? So, you know, for example, legislation, it might not come up as particularly high when we do the prioritisation, and it needs to happen. So we're using intelligence on that. We're using this document to look at our internal resources within change and within data and digital to look at what's possible. We're also looking at it from and importantly linking with Lynn from a finance perspective, both capital and reform funding, so that we're tracking what's our intention, we're tracking any changes, and we're also highlighting the reality at the end of each month. So this document is helping us and will enable us to have different levels of conversation with you in terms of what's priority, what are the benefits that we're forecasting and how we're tracking against those, and particularly from capital and a reform spend. So we are getting there in terms of pulling together that plan. That for me is one of the two, if you like, key activities. The second key activity is this idea of having a work reception, which we're calling the front door. And that is going to be critical. So for all new pieces of work, before people are running ahead and doing them or looking into them, it will be a robust conversation looking at what's it going to take, what's it going to cost, how does this impact with other work that we've got, really thinking about the benefits and making an informed decision about where that links in terms of priority versus all the other work that we're doing. So rather than in the past, work is just happening. If in change we say we haven't got the capacity, people do it anyway. We need to start being more robust in terms of having those conversations. And if we have a conversation that's it's not priority right now, everybody within Police Scotland will buy into that, and we won't find out that things are just happening in the sidelines. So that's, for me, it's the fundamental work that is going on, so that we can start talking with you actually more robustly about benefits, potentially having less change requests coming where certain things, because of resourcing and because of timing, things have moved back. So that's the sort of the overview. And if it was helpful, I can also share with you, I know Pauline, we spoke last week about if it's helpful to give an overview of our current programmes of work, I can do that if that's useful. But I'll pause if there's any questions on that so far.
Thanks very much, Breda. Colleagues, any questions thus far? Angela?
So yeah, I would just say thanks, Breda. And I think the presentation that we had, the discussion that we had last week was really useful as well. And again, just hugely reassured at the approach that's been taken and the connections and the prioritisation, importantly, that you mentioned. I suppose just one comment, and it might come up in the next paper as well, Pauline, so sorry, but I think that what you're saying about tangible and intangible benefits is so important, and the ownership at a service level is really critical, because it's those teams that will realise the benefits. So their understanding of what those benefits will look like, that articulation is really going to be so essential, because I think, as we see in this report, under the costs development, which, when you see it, it must have generated huge benefits. So for it not to be articulated is, I think we're underselling ourselves, to be honest. I think that there's, there will be huge benefits to the front line in, rationalising systems to that degree. But somehow culturally, and it's back to the workforce that Bex mentioned earlier, it's their understanding of how that change is actually benefiting them to invest more time on the things that are important at a local level, or whatever level it may be. So I suppose maybe, just a reflection on this paper, and then going forward, is how does that ownership, how do we make sure that ownership of change and transformation is really understood, so that the people across Police Scotland are actually driving that change, making it happen, and taking ownership of making the benefits realisable and achievable. It's maybe a holy grail question, I'm sorry about that, but...
Well, I'm sure Breda will give it a go.
I will indeed. To me, the intangibles are so important, and I do really understand why the focus has been on tangible. If I think about the work that's been done since Police Scotland formed, and the amount of money that's been taken out of the bottom line, I mean, it's amazing, and it is because people have focused on the numbers quite understandably. For me, with the amount of transformation that's going on, if we can't not only deliver the non-tangible, the intangible benefits, but articulate them to people, all of the change just feels quite hard for everybody. So, as I go around and I talk to people, there is a sort of sense of being fatigued, really, about hearing all the things that we're doing. And it sometimes just feels quite hard to people. So in terms of practically, and then I'll say a few others, in terms of practically, we are starting to do a far more robust process for benefits mapping. And Campbell and Trees are sort of leading on this. There's been a lot of work going on sort of rapid planning sessions, for example, with policing together. So getting the right people in a virtual or a real room, and doing a process where you look at, well, this is the a particular piece of work that we're looking at, really thinking about in terms of the vision. I always sort of look that direction as a sort of visual wall, in that, where are we hoping to get to in terms of top level, what's this going to deliver? And then you think about what are all the solution components, and for each of those, in a lot of detail, if we do that, what does that give us? And that absolutely needs to be also about the intangibles. Particularly if I think about it, one of the 4 pillars of the visions is thriving workforce. So much of that will help us to create a real thriving workforce. And that benefits mapping process also helps us to work out, in addition to these solution components, what are the additional enablers that we need to do, we need to invest in also to help us to move forward. So that process, that robust process, is starting to happen in pieces of work like Policing Together, and we're retrospectively doing it in other pieces, and it's also happening in the criminal justice space, because there's a lot of work going on there. So that will help us at the outset to be clear on what are the whole range of benefits that we will get. The critical thing is we need to then baseline. We need to do some sort of kind of measure of, well, what's the kind of current reality, and then we can work out in the future, particularly the intangibles, how much that gives us. The key thing for me is, and this is all linking to communications, even if we do that work, And even if we do generate these sort of intangible benefits and, you know, kind of links to thriving workforce, unless we start communicating that with people, telling people, you know, this is the program of work, this is what it's going to mean for you. This is the pain at the moment that we see in terms of, you know, the frustration. One of the things that's really keen, the BEX is really keen on, which we've called a sort of a quick win, but it's not been quite so quick, is about expenses, for example. So at the moment, every single expense, even if it's like, you know, £2 needs to get signed off, and it's quite a robust process. And we're looking into, is there some way that we can have a small amount, like £10 or £20, which we can trust people enough. Obviously, there'll be checking processes. Trust people enough that it doesn't need approving. Now, you know, yes. You know, there could be financial benefits because the lack of approvals and so forth, there will be a small saving. The bigger benefit is that people will feel trusted. You know, to me, things like that, and I know, and I love my conversations with Bex on this, we're so aligned. Things like that are so important. The reality is we could do that. The key is we need to tell people we're doing this to make it easier for you. We're doing this because we recognise you're frustrated, and we're doing this to take away some of your pain. If we verbalise that with people, then when we do it, they'll start to realise we've done it for the right reasons. So part of it is about identifying it, Angela, and the other part is verbalising that with people so that they start to realise we're doing things for the right reason. So all of that is absolutely in our thinking and in our planning with the benefits mapping workshops. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Alistair.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Breda. And I think there's quite a bit of overlap in terms of my questions with the questions Angela just asked and the responses that you gave. And just at the end there, you know, those intangible benefits in that example of trust. And when you spoke to us earlier this week, or was it last week, you know, you had culture right at the heart of everything, you know, how things are done around here, how people experience it. I think it was a Galbraith style or something you were speaking to us about. So two questions from me, though. First one is around, you know, we see articulated these, the actual officer efficiencies in terms of hours. We see the cashable savings, but it's quite difficult to work out in the real world, you know, where these are being best utilised within Police Scotland. And in a sense, and from the explanations you've given, that will be clearer in the future. So I think it's an important story to tell, but it's important that we actually see clearly where these benefits are being experienced in the organisation. So I'm just thinking about the timescales. How long do you think before that type of clarity will emerge? And, you know, personally, I really buy into the approach that you're taking. It's clear to me, and I can understand absolutely why it's happening. But there may be a conversation about this is a very centralised approach, you know, and in a big organisation like Police Scotland, there is, you know, a side conversation that goes on about empowering people throughout the organisation and decentralising the organisation to a degree, you know, particularly within local policing areas. So I'm just wondering what thought's been given to that type of conversation and the balance there.
Thanks, Alistair. So the two questions, I'll maybe, if it's all right, answer the second one first, and I'll sort of come back to the first one. So the bit about centralised approach and empowerment. So I think the people that have worked quite closely with me know I'm not into controlling anything, right? You know, so I'm really into empowering people. And actually, you know, in terms of being quite light touch and stepping up and thinking, what do we really need to shift, particularly your bit, and I can say more about it in terms of my big focus is on actually changing the culture. within the team. So you're right. How does that square up with, you know, I want a big plan with everything in it, so that, you know, and I've had and I've spent since I joined an awful lot of my time at Tally-Allen. You know, hopefully, if I look at sort of Allen and Beck's, building really good connections with the DCCs, the ACCs, the other directors, you know, Lynn, you know, etc. Because for me, people need to. I want everybody to really understand the purpose around pulling this together. It's absolutely not to be some sort of controlling person. It's because every single big change impacts on people in this organisation. And if we haven't got a big picture and holistic plan that's with all the bits that are interconnected, but we're in danger of making change that's quite hard, even harder on the people that need to do something different. And that's the bit that we need to understand. So if I think about criminal justice, you know, how it links with policing for our communities, and, you know, and all the good stuff that ACC Patents do in policing together. These are, everybody's so passionate. There are so many amazing pieces of work. They all have impacts on people. And we need to, in transformation, it's our responsibility. I talked last week about connecting the dots. We need to connect the dots to make sure that from a perspective of the people that need to change, we are managing things in a way that is making it as easy as possible. We're communicating effectively. And also, quite often pieces of work that are in motion suddenly discover, well, they could do with a bit of change support, or there could be some sort of financial need for something, you know. And again, the more we understand, the more we can be there to support people at that times. And I can honestly say that I do feel really connected with the ACCs and the directors, so that because in the past I think change, sometimes people came to transformation and it was a little bit hard to work with us because of the one size sort of fits all governance. So for me, I want us, and it links to the bit about culture, I want us within transformation to be seen as having a can-do approach, to be seen as supportive. And it doesn't mean we're always going to say yes. So this is where it's quite two-way. I want to understand. I'm absolutely there to, from a transformation perspective, to make things easy for people and to provide the support. And if we say not right now, because if we think about, just making this up, but, U division in Ayrshire, we can't, absolutely can't do any more change there at the moment because they're overloaded. I need people to buy into that. So the plan gives us the opportunity to have that kind of robust conversation while still empowering people to move forward with the changes that will not sort of cripple us, if you like, within the organisation. So for me, I think you can have the two. And I am actually, from a perspective in terms of how I lead, that's really important to me. Is that okay for the second question, Alistair?
Absolutely. I mean, the way that I'm interpreting what you're saying there is it's a really facilitating role that you have within the organisation, which is going to, improve the effectiveness and the efficiency of the change programme, which will make people's lives both delivering today and transforming the organisation easier. It's about effectiveness and efficiency.
Thank you. You're more succinct than me. The other word that's in my mind is trust. And I know I'm sure I've had this conversation with you, Alistair. Even though I have a big team of people within transformation, the only capital you have in transformation is influence, and that at the core is about having trust with people. So, we in transformation, and I need the entire team to be operating like this, we need to recognise that we're a support to the organisation to help to move things forward. And people will only work with us, people will only recognise that we are here to help if we've got deep trust with people. So that for me is quite fundamental. The other and probably more tricky question in terms of sort of officer efficiencies, cash flows, and sort of how long before we're at a point where we can be a little bit more certain. So probably the top level answer is every single week and month we're going to get better as we have done, as we run more of these benefits mapping workshops with pieces of work. Like there's a lot going on at the moment with criminal justice, where Campbell is running these sessions literally weekly for the different programs of work. So the more that we do in that domain, the better we will be at identifying really clearly what are the efficiency savings, what are the cashables, and what are the intangibles, so that we can start to track them. So we will continually get better, and particularly as new pieces of work come on board. My worry is with pieces of work that are already in motion, that are already near to delivery, you know, it's going to be hard actually, because we have in the business case numbers that might be absolutely accurate and deliverable and might not be. So that's kind of my sort of hesitation, and I suppose the key for me is we'll continually get better, and particularly as I suppose I get underneath the specifics for each of the different programs of work. Is that helpful?
That's very helpful. It's clarity on where these efficiencies are being utilised in the organisation is something I think that we would like to see. You know, because in the past we've had reports about X numbers of hours, but where are they being utilised to benefit the people of Scotland? Where they're being utilised to help the chief and the team deliver against that Vision 2030, so we can see, you know, this is an input that's changed in the organisation, and you know the outcome of that is this, and the benefit is clear.
And I think you're quite right. In the past, and kind of even maybe at the moment, we're definitely not good enough at that. So you know, we're in the past, if I look at programs of work, it said that we're going to release, you know, this many officers to the front line, and then there's a conversation about what happened to them, and everybody's kind of working hard to try and make sense of it. And for me, the key thing is, and my colleague Teresa and I have gone through this with DCC Connors, and she's completely bought into it, that particularly if it's about strengthening the front line and it's releasing people or capacity that's going to you know, with people for warranted powers, the way that will be managed is in DCC Connors Ops Policing Management Board, and for me that's absolutely the right place. You know, it's Jane and all of her team. They can make the informed decision around where do we need this resource. So we will help to supply the information with, this is the numbers, this is the when, so that they even beforehand can be starting to think. So for me, that's the right, when it's strengthening the front line, that's absolutely the right forum to be tracking and to be making sure that it really is strengthening the front line. So we have a plan in place to going forward for that element to be pretty robust.
Yeah, that's really positive to hear that, and I agree that's the right place for those decisions to be made. And it's just the provision, the clarity of, well, there's the hours, and there's where they've gone, and here's the intention of what they will deliver. That's what I think, you know, needs to be in the public domain. It needs to be understood, you know, for all the great efforts that people are making across the organisation. That's fine for me for the moment. Thanks, Pauline, Chair, for allowing that.
Thanks very much, and thanks. We very much support the direction of travel. We do have an action outstanding on an action log for the revised benefits realisation reporting to come to committee from our next meeting onwards. So it would be helpful to start to reflect this conversation in the enhanced reports as you've described from next time onwards. Thanks. Back to you, Breda, for the second part. Again, we had a very helpful conversation last week, so you don't need to repeat the detail. We've all read the papers, but I know you were going to enhance this with an update in terms of where we currently are in terms of the current programme of work.
Thank you. So I sent just a little bit of information on that across to you, and it's to share with you that we have 10 programmes of work at the moment. I wonder if Alistair, if you had a question, sorry, or is that from before? No, okay, sorry, no, just okay, no problem. So there's 10 programmes of work in the portfolio. Within that, there's 40 individual projects, and 7 of those are sort of legislation or standalone, but the majority of them fit under these 10 programmes of work. Of the 10 programmes of work, 3 of them are red. So I thought it would be helpful just to say a few words on each of those and link it forward to some of the papers that we will be covering a bit later today. So the first programme of work that is kind of overall red at the moment is enabling policing for the future. And one of the key things within that is the e-financials paper, which we'll be talking about later. Just, you know, top level, I think we all know that we had a bit of issue with the current supplier, obviously with the penetration test. So we have a BJC this afternoon to go and tender for a new solution. So that is going to be covered later. And on this call, I do just want to call out Scott and again just say really appreciated your support and your help and direction with that. So thank you very much. So that's that. So with the e-financials, that will help us to get back on track. The other project within enabling policing for the future that we've got a little bit of work to do on is the estate's asset management system, where there's been a delay. The 2 elements of that, one is that there was some work to do at the beginning in terms of clarifying, are we going for sort of a full requirements from day one, or are we going for a modular approach? That delayed us a bit, and we have landed on we're going for a modular approach now. The other part that delayed that was originally it was hoped that we could use a cloud solution. Obviously, with we can understand issues around that. That is now not the solution, so we have to go back to procurement to get a different solution. So those 2 have delayed us. There is a change request that's coming through for that, for the timing element of that. So that is sort of a summary really of where we are with enabling policing for the future, and the e-financials is paper 9.1.2 this afternoon. The second of the 3 programmes is Data Drives Digital, and there's one of the projects within that that is sort of driving that overall red status, which is force-wide analytics, the kind of key there is we did have connection issues. It's been a bit of a challenging programme for us, and also we've been kind of relying quite heavily on contract workers, which has sort of slowed us down. So there is a change request that will be coming, and once that's we're going to bring that in once the connection issues have been kind of resolved. Then we'll bring in a change request to get us back on track. The other element within Data Drives Digital is GDPR, which we've got a change request in this afternoon, which is 9.2.3. So that's just linking through to that. In terms of force-wide analytics, it might be helpful to say that it's a little delay to the first drop, which is going to move back from June to July. That's the nominal data. The second one will be in August, and that's on location data, and the third one in September. So it just moved back a little bit. So we're hopeful that will be the sort of the new timing. So that's Data Drives Digital. And the third programme of work is Policing in a Digital World, that is currently showing red. The key in all of the pieces of work within that, it's all around resourcing. And you know, if I look at digital forensic redesign, there's a resource issue, and we're working with the digital forensics SMT to ascertain sort of how and when are we going to get those resources, because they're business area resources that we need to support that. And the other one is ISO 17025, enhancing digital forensics. We have got a few people that are on that full-time at the moment, but we need to speed that up. So we're looking at how can we get additional resources and rephase it appropriately. So that one is all around resourcing. If I step up out of the sort of the detail, it just highlights for me as I look at the whole transformation plan and I think about resourcing, how we're probably, unless we're going to start properly reprioritising, we're going to continue to have these conversations where change requests are coming in, additional cost is incurred because we haven't really had enough resource to move things forward sufficiently. So for me, that's the bigger question that I'm sitting with. How can we, because from a change perspective, if you think about it, we're managing people's energy through things. It would be far better to do projects in a shorter time period from start to finish in terms of how we manage people's energy, rather than have programs that are so sort of elongated. So that's my sort of bigger picture message. But top level, we've got plans and a couple of papers this afternoon to move most of that back on track. Is that helpful, and is that a kind of enough of an update on the programme?
Rita, really helpful, thank you. I think you mentioned a paper that had been submitted. I don't think members have got that, but if we could have that circulated through Secretariat, that would be really helpful. And then getting into a kind of a regular reporting cycle in terms of the overall programme, accepting what you've said about, you know, this being a kind of a transitional process that we're in at the moment. I just wanted to highlight the issue you just raised there at the end in terms of the resourcing of these programmes of work. Yes, they are complex, but absolutely agree with you. You know, better to really kind of focus and prioritise the resource and do it well and within a reasonable time frame, rather than have it dragged out, because, you know, we're asking the same resources to do far too much in a short period of time. So we'd absolutely lend our support in terms of really kind of prioritising the programmes of work with those that are going to be most impactful soonest, and securing the necessary resources to deliver them effectively. Colleagues, anything else on item 4? No, really helpful. So very much support the new direction of travel. Thanks to everybody involved. I'm going to suggest we have a 10-minute comfort break, colleagues, and start back the private session at 5 to 11.